BTC Sessions, aka Ben, the legend, joining us from the Great White North, Josh, Calgary, Canada.
How much snow do you have there now? Like 2 feet by now? What is it?
Literally, it is. There's not a speck of snow on my lawn right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird. Although it did snow a few days before Halloween, because Calgary likes to slap you in the face.
Yeah, we got that too here.
Times in the year. Yeah.
It's gnarly here. Not that we're going to, weather's a horrible intro topic for a podcast, but it is this. It's like in the 30s and raining this morning. And I'll tell you, I got off shift in rush shape. I got a level with you guys, enter my headspace. Long night last night at work, Josh. Fire alarms, ambulance calls galore, and left the fire station at 8:15. Knew I needed to do everything in my power to boot and rally for one of our favorite guests on the show. So I have emptied the tank. The magazine is empty. Here is what I have done to get myself mentally and physically prepared for this chat. I have a venti Christmas blend Starbucks. Starbucks
Yuppie.
Sessions got it right there.
You guys are
I am
yuppies.
wearing my favorite slippers. Okay. Had these for years. They're my favorites. I am wearing, and before I say this, I am comfortable in my masculinity, but this is going to be shocking for people that have envisioned Josh and I only wearing turnout gear slinging axes. I have on teal Lululemon.
That's how they all envision us.
I repeat, teal Lululemon joggers. I am wearing panties for Bitcoin.
Wait, stand up. Stand up and spin around really quick
male
for us.
panties, and
I'm legit wearing panties for Bitcoin right now.
And there's no professional or monetary affiliation. This is all coming from the heart. Here they are for the 4 women watching on YouTube. Panties for Bitcoin right here.
Are your nuts just super comfortable?
They are cozy. And then the hoodie for those on YouTube.
How many days in a row can you get away with wearing those, you think? I did 2 in a row. That's kind of sketchy, I think. But they're comfortable.
I go to 2 quite often.
As long as you wipe well, you're good, you know? You're good.
This started so well.
Get some dude wipes. And then the hoodie, guys. I'm wearing the panties for Bitcoin hoodie. Basically my point there was I could not be more comfortable. I could not be more prepared. Despite the deck being stacked against me, couldn't be more excited to have this discussion with you two.
I'm excited that you started out this way because I want to describe really quick my morning so far. I slept great last night. Didn't work.
You
got up. My wife and I set out we do the elf on the shelf thing for our kids. So it was a big, exciting morning. The elves showed up. They were in the Christmas tree. Shuffled the kids off to school with my wife, and then I drew myself a super hot bath, which I don't do ever, and that's very feminine, but I lit candles. I took a really hot bath, and I set my iPad up.
Lit a candle?
I did. No, I didn't. That's bullshit.
Shit. Okay.
I did set up my iPad to watch your latest video, lowering your Bitcoin fees.
That's what they're calling porn these days, huh?
Vulnerable and naked in my tub, watching sessions.
How comfortable I am with this. I'll take it.
Wait, is that it?
Tell us about your morning.
Yeah, well, you know what? We did the elf on the shelf too, but now I feel bad about it because American Hodl tweeted out and he was like, elf on the shelf is a government psyop to get kids used to the idea of the nanny state watching over them.
We're getting them used to the panopticon now. Like the elf on the shelf is here now, but the tax man and the federal government's over your shoulder later.
Yeah, like think of the analogy there. There's somebody watching everything you do, and if you do something outside of their rule set, they'll stop giving you handouts. It's the perfect analogy for the government.
Bitcoiners should just fuck their kids up and ruin the whole Santa for the whole classroom and teach their kids to rebel.
It's all bullshit.
We should all make it so that the elves continue to demand more and more of the kids until the kids are just like, fuck it. And then the elf yanks all of the presents.
It's brilliant. That's a business idea right there.
Yeah. It's a libertarian elf on the shelf.
So I think the Bitcoiners version of this is just the Grinch elf. We need Grinch elves is what we need. Bring reality back to these little children.
And then they could have like Velcroed on like faces of the current politicians.
Man, this could have serious legs. Hey, don't discount it.
Yeah, don't give that away for free. Copyright.
So we were talking just before we started recording about your latest video, just about how well done it is, and you were explaining just how long it takes to produce these things. And I did one over a year ago now, just to kind of test it out and see how, and I absolutely hated producing this thing. It was a nightmare. I have great respect for what you do after attempting one myself, and I don't think I'll be fucking wading back into those waters again. But give us a quick update on yourself, what's going on with you, some of your latest videos, just a quick update on Ben.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I've got to say, like, I feel like there's so many projects on the go that are in the midst of happening. So I guess, I mean, the business as usual stuff that's going on, I'm still pumping out tutorials every single week, still doing the news show with Nico every Thursday, still doing Why Are We Bullish every Friday. So like, that's the base of it. My wife is helping me out. She chops up the Friday shows and picks the quotes. So whenever you see those like couple minute clips, she's behind them all. She's the one picking out the cool rants and doing all that, which is awesome. Yeah. So I hats off to Mrs. Sessions for that. So yeah, that the regular run of stuff is happening. On the side, I've been doing a lot of stuff with the Human Rights Foundation. And so I received a grant from the Human Rights Foundation earlier this year for God, what was it? It was for $25,000.
Very cool, dude.
Which was
that's awesome.
Wild. So I threw my hat in the ring and they were like, yeah, you got a grant. And so now part of what I'm funneling that into is I'm number one, I'm working with different human rights political dissidents from around the globe, and I'll do like one-on-one calls or group calls with them, teaching how to use various Bitcoin tools so that they can evade sanctions.
Dude, this is badass. Holy shit. I didn't know you were doing this.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's so cool. Like I've spoken with people from around the world, post-Soviet states where human rights conditions are not great. People from Central and South America. It's all over the map, but it's super cool. So I'm working with that, but I'm also putting together a track of 10 kind of shorter than usual tutorials that are just kind of straight to the point. How do I use this stuff? And it's I'm starting with 10 videos of various tools that make sense for human rights dissidents, or for political dissidents that are fighting for human rights. And then I've started using AI to do translations. And when I say translations, I don't mean like there's subtitles. I mean, I plunk this video into a program.
I've heard about this.
In my voice.
It's amazing.
It makes it into Spanish, Mandarin, Hindi, whatever I want. Those are the three languages I'm doing first. And it CGIs my lips so it looks like I'm speaking the language. I put it up.
Fucking
a bunch
crazy.
of people were like, dude, you know Spanish? Like it's that good. And there's the odd word where it's like, it might not make entire sense, but like in the context of the video, it would be easy enough to navigate. I would just seem like maybe I misspoke or something. But like, to give you an idea of how much this matters, especially like, I think to me and the ability to educate people from everywhere, is what I was facing before was trying to figure out, number one, you had to like get the actual transcription of everything I've said in there. You'd have to find somebody that not only knows both languages, but also knows Bitcoin at the same time,
right.
And can like create the new transcription. And then somebody, because I can't just have subtitles, because people need to be looking at what I'm doing, not reading what's below it. And so I need somebody to overdub it. But furthermore, I need the overdub to be timed perfectly because it has to pertain to what's on the screen. So between all of that, the cost of that was going to be just so exorbitant that it was just completely off the table. Right now, and I'm using part of the grant money for this, I pay $250 a month, and I can probably pump out 3 videos in different languages that would have cost me thousands.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dude, the amount of uses for AI. I mean, this stuff is, I've heard of this before, and it's amazing to hear someone using it firsthand and like how they're doing it. But the deflationary forces here are just to be reckoned with. Like, it's just insane.
I wouldn't be surprised if by next year there were like a handful of other options and the price of it drops by half.
For sure.
Unbelievable.
Dude, and we've said this before on here, Sessions, but this stuff is really exciting and opportunity giving for dudes like the two of us, and I'm sure you. Like, if you're an incumbent podcaster or media person, this is a bummer, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of red tape's been stripped down. But if you're doing something unique and you're garnering an organic audience, like, it's creating a more meritocratic digital media environment. Josh and I can spit out a much higher quality, let's say, video product and have a much more high profile looking social media presence just with ourselves and a little bit of help on the side because of all these tools that are suddenly available. I mean, we're talking like last couple of years available. Even when we started this podcast, Josh, this shit wasn't nearly where it is right now. I mean, the speed at which it's accelerating is jaw dropping.
It's amazing. And it's again, like, what this does is it takes, I mean, I think that probably inside of the next couple of years, it will be easy to basically record a tutorial as normal and then have like a bunch of toggle switches and just say Spanish, Hindi, Mandarin, whatever, and just have it even for live shows. You're getting to a point where you'll be able to just have a live show. It could be this show, all of us looking at each other with CGI'd lips, speaking in another language, and somebody watching it with maybe like a 30-second delay or something. That's coming.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Dude, while we're on this human rights topic, I want to talk about some of your experiences. So first of all, congrats for making Lynn's book, man. I finished that the other week. I was really pumped to see she put you in there. Well deserved. We haven't on this show with you. We have a little bit in person when we saw you at Pacific, but haven't on the show had you unpack. And I'm assuming you can share quite a bit. I don't know what you can and can't, or who's coming on to your door there in Canada, but talk to us about the trucker protest experience from your side, and maybe most specifically what you learned from that, what you took away from that, and then what you can pass on from that experience to these people that you're educating, these dissidents. Yeah.
So, this was actually the impetus for a lot of my involvement in the HRF. We got a dry run here in Canada of what can happen when a government decides to cut people off financially because they're protesting something that isn't, that is not state approved. If it's not a state approved protest, this can happen. And it happened in Canada of all places. For two reasons that's pretty important. Number one, we're typically a pretty compliant bunch. And number two, like typically you don't, exactly. And you don't think of Canada as being as draconian as it got.
No.
And so, this happened in the dead of winter and people were so fed up. Like, this was the largest protest in Canadian history. All of Canadian history. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And people don't realize, like, there's a lot of people that were within Canada that were very dismissive of it. But when you have the largest protest in a country's history, then you have to give weight to the sentiment being shared by the people that are protesting. There's something that you actually have to address there. And I think that was missed by a lot of people. But nonetheless,
not only was it big, though, it was peaceful. It was completely peaceful. People weren't throwing bricks through windows. People weren't flipping cars over and burning them. We're not talking about insanity and pandemonium here. Yeah. We're just talking about people just refusing, to move edgewise when the government's telling them, to leave.
Yeah, the portrayal in the Canadian media and probably in some media in other countries as well, was such a departure from what was actually going on. So you probably saw at some point there were images of some idiot waving a Nazi flag. There was, there's like one or two idiots down there that would just jerks. What was not caught, because they played that guy with the flag over and over and over on every bit of news media coverage. What they didn't show after the fact was anytime somebody was getting out of line like that, all the protesters would be going up and being like, what the fuck are you doing? You need to get fuck out of here. And like basically shove them out of there. And then they would resume playing with their children in the bouncy castles and having a live concert on the street and like singing and dancing and bagging. I kid you not, bagging their own garbage. like literally. And then we put somebody had put, there's no bathrooms or anything down there. So somebody went pee, and it was like near a statue that was marked for like an unnamed veteran type thing, and people were super offended by that. The next day, all of the people basically cleaned and polished the statue and like shoveled the snow and like did everything, like cleaned it up, bagged all their garbage, like left flowers, like all of these things. So like it was one of the most respectful, like, yeah, it was noisy. If you were going to be if you were living down there, the horns and everything, it would probably get to you. But at the same time, like buildings weren't being set ablaze. People were not being like assaulted and beaten in the street. There was nothing of that nature. So the long and the short, I guess, to your original question, what was learned, what kind of came of it. So everything on the Bitcoin side of things was initially done in a way that was just quickly done, because at the time it was done, they hadn't even reached Ottawa yet, and there was no indication that the government was going to do what it was going to do. As far as anybody knew, this was effectively what it was exactly as it was intended to be, just a peaceful protest to say we're not going to put up with this anymore.
Yeah.
And so it was Greg Foss reached out. He had been in contact with a couple guys that had Bitcoin QR codes down there. And people were like, oh, it'd be cool if we could accept Lightning donations. And so Foss reached out to me and he was like, hey, is this something that you could help with? Like, could we set that up? And so I kind of peeked around. Okay, what's the easiest way to do this? And I had a simple, just a simple app on the node that I was running at the time. I had an Umbrel node, and there's an app called Tallycoin, and basically it allowed you to like link your own Lightning node to it. And I had like a really good node with lots of channels and everything, and you could link your node to a page and then accept Lightning donations. And then you could also get on-chain donations. And the problem with Tallycoin at the time was you could upload an XPub, and those unfamiliar, an XPub basically is the part of your wallet that generates new addresses every single time you receive a transaction. You could upload that, but unbeknownst to me, the way it functioned initially, not anymore, but initially was it would generate a new address for each fundraiser that you did, not each donor. And so once we set it up, though, it was kind of like, well, this is the page. If I make a change, then there's opportunity for scammers to jump in and like, oh no, this is the real page now, or this is the so nonetheless, it was set up that way. We very quickly received way more donations than we thought. We set an initial goal for 10 million sats. We got to 23 Bitcoin.
Wow.
Oh boy.
1/1,000,000th of all Bitcoin that will ever exist were donated to this single cause, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Dan and I are paramedics. We see people day in and day out who have one major concern: insurance. They either have no insurance or they have some inadequate insurance that doesn't cover a thing, while sticking them with a huge premium. They're worried about the cost of the ambulance and the hospital. Sometimes they refuse to be transported to the hospital for urgent needed care just because they don't have insurance. This is where CrowdHealth comes in. CrowdHealth is not health insurance. It's better. You contribute every month to a fund that covers you and assists other members in need. If you ever have a significant health issue, you can get crowdfunded. You pay the first $500 and then the community will step in to help you out. CrowdHealth will negotiate on your behalf to obtain the best price possible. If you're sick of overpriced and underperforming insurance companies, try CrowdHealth. Support humans, not giant healthcare corporations. You can try it starting at $99 per month for the first 6 months if you use code BLUE. That's code BLUE. Have you been paying attention the last few years? If so, you know one thing. Not your keys, not your coins. This is a quaint saying, but it's real. If you're not holding your seed keys, you have a Bitcoin IOU, not Bitcoin. CoinKite is the maker of the Cold Card Mark IV. This is the industry standard for holding the keys to your Bitcoin. Holding your keys should not be intimidating, and it isn't. The Mark IV makes this an incredibly simple process. You could be a degenerate firefighter and hold your own keys. That's how simple it is. If you want to create a more complex setup, the Cold Card Mark IV has you covered there as well. You can create a multisig using a cold card, a tap signer, and even the upcoming Q1. Speaking of the Q1, If you want to have every bell and whistle and give yourself no boundaries as far as interacting with Bitcoin is concerned, the Q1 is your signing device. CoinKite makes some of the most sought after gear in Bitcoin: the block clock, seed plates, the open dime, and the Sats card. Everything you need to secure your Bitcoin. Click on the link in our show notes to get discounts at the CoinKite store or use code BCB for 5% off the Mark IV.
Yeah. Like,
it's incredible.
The thing that is really disheartening about this, though, is that if people just don't care, if they weren't affected, or if they weren't somebody who was affected by this financial Armageddon that happened up there where they shut your bank account down, nobody really cares. And it's kind of like in the US when Snowden did all these revelations in 2013. I sat up and I was like, people are going to care about this. This is going to matter. Like, they're snooping on everything you're doing. There's this large panopticon getting manufactured right underneath the backbone of the internet. People are going to have to care about this, right? Well, like 6 months goes by and nobody cares anymore. It just kind of blows over and people stop caring about things that don't directly affect them.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of it. And it's really sad because people don't take this stuff seriously until it directly affects them. And when it does, it's generally too late for it to matter. Like, you're not going to be able to stop this thing at that point.
The beautiful thing, though, before I hand it back to you, Ben, is that we do now have, Josh, a larger and larger globally distributed community of people that do care about this shit. I'm a perfect case in point. I think you would agree, Josh. Like, if it weren't for Bitcoin, I probably wouldn't care. I would probably be still mostly in normie personal finance land. Like, that was my passion pre-Bitcoin. It's kind of what led me to Bitcoin, made me attentive to sort of what Josh was explaining at work. But Bitcoin has changed my perspective. It has put a different lens on the importance of digital freedom and sovereignty and government overreach. And I know there are many, many other people like me. So I guess to think optimistically, the hope is that Bitcoin is sort of the Trojan horse that brings in not only better money, but a more holistic, well-rounded, realistic perspective and concern about increased surveillance and control in the digital age that's unprecedented. And I think we're watching that play out.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think that a number of people that partook in the protest and then had either it happen to them or had the threat of their bank accounts and credit cards and all of this stuff. Some people had the insurance canceled for their vehicles. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. Credit cards wouldn't work. Bank accounts wouldn't work. People couldn't pay their mortgages, things like that. It was just like they were cut off. So a lot of people had their first interaction with Bitcoin be, oh, wow, this is the only digital payment mechanism that actually worked. Literally, of all the online donations, Give, Send, Go and GoFundMe both got shut down in different ways. GoFundMe themselves voluntarily said, oh, this is outside of our terms of service. And they were going to originally just like take the funds and donate them to something else they decided on until there was a threat of a lawsuit. And then they just refunded the donors. Give, Send, Go said, we're not going to do that. We will actually get the money where it needs to go. They send it to a Canadian bank and the bank takes it. So that was basically the flow of things. Meanwhile, Bitcoin, like this Bitcoin was the only thing that actually made it into the hands of truckers, albeit not 100% because there was hiccups at the end that came because of the way that things were done, unfortunately, which I'll kind of give my Cliff's notes of improvements. But at the end of the day, had we used best practices, no question, all of that money would have gone directly into the hands of people that needed it. So main takeaways, I think I'll say just really quick to give people a better idea. Number one, obviously any donation site should have a mechanism through which you generate a new address every single time. BTC Pay Server, excellent for that. So, there's a solution there. And you can also host that through Voltage if you wanted to, or host it yourself. And then, if you got the skills, then you can get that up on the internet easy now. Lightning donations, it's important to note that the sender is the beneficiary of the privacy on Lightning. As a node, it's easy to point to a node and say, like, this is the node that's getting the payments. But if it's kind of obfuscated where that node resides, then that's also beneficial. In terms of security of funds, we had a multisig going. We had a 3 of 5 multisig through Nunchuck, which Nunchuck I love. I like the ability to set up a multisig from afar.
Super
with
easy.
an encrypted chat is amazing. We did run into a bug, and that's where, and this was very early on. It's obviously since been fixed, but the way that you send a transaction from the multisig is you have a group chat. Anybody can propose a transaction, and then it sends that transaction into the group chat, and anybody from the quorum can click on it and give a signature as well. The messages weren't being relayed, so nobody could see the transaction to click and approve. And so we had to migrate the keys to a single location to get the remainder of the funds moving, at which point that person had their door kicked in by RCMP and everything taken.
Wow.
Yeah. So
shit got real.
Shit got real. Yeah, absolutely. So, but what I would say in general is we had a 3 of 5, and I think it was too cumbersome. I would say a 2 of 3 is probably more than enough, because you need to be able to move quickly in a pinch, and it's hard to get a hold of people and like get shit moving efficiently when you're relying on making sure that at least 3 people can sign quickly. So that was a factor. So 2 of 3 would be great. We had all of the key holders publicly identifiable, which initially, when we're thinking like, oh, we just don't want a single point of failure, we didn't think that single point of failure could be publicly identifiable people in the same country.
Yeah.
So what you could do feasibly is have public personas vet their entire reputation on knowing who the key holder is, but not revealing it publicly. And that key holder may not be local, may be outside of the country. And so then we had the don't trust verify element of like, who's running this. So in order to get that amount of donations, you needed to have somebody that people were like, okay, I know like this person's not going to screw themselves by just like running off with a few Bitcoin. So yeah, you need that kind of mixture. So I think that's maybe the best step forward is publicly identifiable people vetting key holders instead. And then the last thing I would say is when the funds were given out, there's this don't trust verify degree that's sitting there. And so I think when they were being given out on the ground, I'm across the country on the other side of the country, but like it would be better to have, if somebody wants to verify themselves and say, hey, I received donations, like these guys are actually giving out funds, then that's their prerogative. But, you know, some of the giving out was filmed. And so like that could have been a privacy issue for those individuals. Luckily, I don't think there was any instance where it ended up actually being that anybody came after those funds, but it could have been. So that's something to consider too. So those are kind of my takeaways. I actually did a talk on the whole thing in Prague this year. I did like a 25-minute keynote on the trucker protests, and it's on YouTube. So if you look up Ben Perrin BTC Prague, it goes through what happened, and then it goes through all of the tools that I think people could use to replace what we did.
We'll link that.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
While I was soaking in the bathtub this morning, watching Lower Your Bitcoin Fees, which was well
crazy.
done.
Wait, this is real? This isn't made up? You were legitimately soaking in the bathtub, and you were watching sessions?
Yes. And half of it was just for the reason of talking about this and a funny fucking thing to talk about. And also, I just haven't soaked in a bathtub in a while, and I felt like it was time, you know? I'm watching your video, and a couple of things occurred to me. Number one is you had to use about 5 different applications throughout the video in order to make that happen, right? And I watched it the other day, and I was like, I want to rewatch this today, because not that you didn't do a good job. It's just like, it's kind of a lot of moving parts. And to make sure I had it down and understood it, I rewatched it this morning while soaking. And number one, we are so early. The point I'm getting at here is like, I still have boomers that I talk to on a regular basis who want me to, I got to get this on the schedule to go over to this guy's house and help him out. But all he wants to do is move off of an exchange and into cold storage. And this is like a step too far for him.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this video thinking to myself, like, if the majority of people over the age of, say, 50 just to pick out a number, are too worried to even move it off of an exchange and put it in cold storage. Like, what are the chances that these people are going to take the steps that you outlined in that video in order to do some of these more esoteric things in Bitcoin to lower their fees?
Yeah.
It's almost zero. And it reminds me of a lot of like what Antonopoulos used to talk about in the Internet of Money, which is he was a nerd in 1989 and 1990 who was one of the first people using email simply because he understood and he had the chops to do it. Mm-hmm. There's very few people that have the chops to do this. And not only because it's a bit tech, you have to be a bit tech savvy, but you also have money on the line. Back in the day when you were sending an email, if you fucked it up, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It was just some message to somebody or yourself just to play around. You didn't have any real skin in the game or money on the line. In this case, you do. So people are very apprehensive about moving this stuff around because there's a lot of value attached to it potentially. And again, why we all recommend that when you do these things, you do it with a little bit of money. Mm-hmm. I guess what I'm driving at here with the question though is, how do you maintain the leading edge on the Bitcoin tech side of things? Do you set aside a bit of time every day to kind of get yourself familiarized with all, because there's so many tools. And every time I watch one of your videos, I'm like, oh shit, I've never even heard of that. Like, where does this, who's your, like, two things. Where's the source? Like, do you have a few different recommendations of people you follow that like talk about some of the leading edge stuff? And then do you sit down for a period of time once a week or so to kind of learn yourself? How do you, what's your method for that?
Yeah. So one of my favorite resources that I mean, first of all, again, being on like combo of like Twitter and NOSTR and just like following good people that talk about new cool things, that helps a ton. So that brings things across my radar. But one of my favorite websites is No BS Bitcoin.
Okay.
So No BS Bitcoin. They have a variety of things. Like they'll always have like, oh, there's this conference, or Sailor bought like a depressing amount of Bitcoin again today, and like all that.
16,000 yesterday, no big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever. It was Thursday. Of course he did.
Michael Saylor, if you're listening, in the most loving, respectful way possible, go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself. Yeah. But like so No BS Bitcoin also has like, oh, there's a new release of this app and there's these updates. And so a lot of stuff comes across my radar just seeing the current releases there, because they do the new software releases and the new apps and all that kind of stuff get brought to light there. So a combo of just social media, like gradually following, and I couldn't even name them all. There's just way too many people to keep track of. But No BS Bitcoin is a great website, and it's as Sweet. They say, it's no bullshit Bitcoin, just like straight to the point. They kind of.
How have I not heard of this before, Dan? Have you ever heard of this?
No.
It's great.
It's going on my list.
They have a feed on Twitter as well. They have a Telegram group, and it just posts the articles, and you just go in and check them out. But it's excellent. I think it's super high signal.
Yeah. Okay. So the other question then, just to interrupt you here, is who's doing the tutorials to teach you how to do this stuff? Are you just literally throwing darts at the wall, like, okay, I know what I'm trying to do here. I'm just going to fuck around until it works out. And then, yeah,
it's a lot of that. So yeah, like every week, I mean, the main challenge to myself is to pump out a tutorial every single week. And so some weeks I'm not feeling super motivated. And so I'll pick out of the list of stuff that I've wanted to cover, I'll pick something simple where I'm like, okay, it's a new basic wallet on mobile. I could pump that out, edit it, and post it probably inside of a day. And then other times it's like, oh, here's a new thing that I don't even understand how it works or what it does, but I just got to dive in. And so when I'm doing that, so I have live shows on Thursdays and Fridays. That gives me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. To one of the days is let's just fuck around and see how this works, and just like try it, and then make some notes in the middle of it and try and figure out exactly what I'm doing so that I can replicate it the next day. Sometimes when I do that, if it's too early in terms of like the app itself or whatever it is, and it's just there's bugs galore and it doesn't work, sometimes that just means it's a throwaway week, and either it's going to bleed into the next week and I don't get a tutorial that week, or I just change gears and do a simple one the next day. And I'm like, I'll come back to this in 6 months and see if it's ready. But basically the ideal flow that week where I have a hard one is I spend a day learning how to do it. And I have like my notes and outline by the end of that day. The next day, I just do the thing and I record it and maybe do a bit of editing. And then the last day is like fully edit, get it uploaded, and then just blast it out everywhere, all the threads, all of that. So, yeah.
Man. You know, I think a good reminder for people listening is that, as dumb as this sounds to you creating it, Ben doesn't just know how to do this shit. It comes with a lot of time, effort.
What are you
and hard
talking
work.
about, Dan? This is sacrilege to say these types of things on here. This is how we get shadow banned.
If you guys could see the B-roll of how many F-bombs happen in a new concept of a tutorial,
hardware wallets getting chucked. And I think honestly, on a way different scale, not to give Josh and I much more credit, but when we get DMs and people reach out, it's like Josh and I have also spent hundreds of hours exploring. I mean, this last week, I'm not as tech motivated as some others. So especially now that we're doing this as a part-time job, like I have to push myself to spend time. So like this last week, I took the time to set up or to watch an Unchained vault in Caravan. I've already done that in Sparrow. Josh and I were exchanging some questions, talking about how UTXOs get reflected and all this stuff. But I have to say, okay, Daniel, you're going to go in the basement and once I'm 10, 15 minutes in, I get animated and excited about it. And every time I move Bitcoin, seriously, almost every time I move Bitcoin, I have a moment where I sit there and I go, this thing is absolutely incredible. But I have to, it's like working out, right? And so if you are someone listening that is motivated to be more comfortable with your Bitcoin, which I know a lot of people are, there is no shortcut. You are going to have to experiment and explore. And I guess I'm going to play both sides of the fiddle here for a second, because we do kind of maybe confuse in this regard. I think single sig setups on say a cold card and Sparrow wallet, they are robust enough. They do, going through that process with say those two things I just mentioned, does teach you enough to be like to have earned the right to self-custody, for lack of a better term. Like if you're driving a car and you have absolutely no idea how to change a tire, maybe you shouldn't be driving a car, right? And the same thing could be said of self-custody. And I feel like with a cold card and say Sparrow, which we often joke, if you can assemble a Lego set for ages 7 and up, you can probably accomplish those two things. That's one side. The other side is that practically we have now 6 years into our time in Bitcoin watched this be even what I just mentioned, which to us seems really easy. There's just so much more friction surrounding it for even people that are accumulating meaningful amounts of Bitcoin. It's really surprising. And I think for me, it makes me think about what we mean when we say the word easy, right? Yeah. I've played golf since a very young age. I played in high school, I played in college, and I worked in the golf business. Although not every time, I can pipe a drive 280 yards up the middle and say, that's easy. All I did was take it back here and swing through here. It was easy. It's like, that's not easy for someone that's never done it. And I think that parallels cold storage to some extent, because Josh and I say all the time, it is wild to us how few people actually take these steps. And so here's the other side, is now coming and facing reality and saying, you know what, maybe it is, whether it's just the perception of it or the reality, it's hard to parse which one. It is harder for other people. And we need to meet, instead of just saying it's easy, anyone can do it. Hat tip to you for actually going out there and showing people how to do it. I guess all those words are to say there's no way you're going to get comfortable unless you go move some Bitcoin around.
Dan's, just real quick to interject here, his nickname at work is quickly becoming Country Club, because he literally is he's like a silver spoon baby. He plays tennis and golf and is exceedingly good at both. And everyone else is like, where the fuck did this guy come from? He calls himself blue collar.
Yeah, I've long
he's a
said,
golfer and a tennis player.
I've long
fuck
said,
out of here. You play polo too, don't you?
I have a horse. Fuck these people at these country clubs. I belong there. I'm built to be at a country club. Maybe Bitcoin will get me there one day.
Have you had the intention to mine Bitcoin, but thought that the equipment is too expensive or that running your own miner might be a bit too technical? Maybe you thought it would be cool, but the cost of electricity where you live makes it pointless. With HeatBit, you can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. It's a Bitcoin miner, a heater, and an air purifier all in one. It's a plug-and-play device that could not be simpler to operate. It has the latest 5nm chips to make it one of the most efficient Bitcoin miners in the world. On average, the HeatBit Mini pays for 70% of the electricity it uses. The HeatBit Mini also operates quietly. Good luck selling the idea to your wife that you're going to plug in Bitcoin miners in your basement that operate at the volume of a lawnmower. Not going to happen. HeatBit operates silently while keeping your significant other warm and cozy. HeatBit cares about your marriage. So, if you want to mine Bitcoin and remain married, order a HeatBit Mini and keep warm while it pays for its own electricity bill. Visit heatbit.com and use code BCB for 5% off a HeatBit Mini.
It's so I guess to that respect, nothing is easy if you've never done it. Right? It's the same. What I will say is Bitcoin self-custody is no more difficult than the transition of people going to online banking. The first time somebody used online banking, the interfaces are still trash for online banking. So like when grandma realized that she can't go into the bank every single day and she's got like an iPad now to like figure out how to send money and everything, like it is no more difficult than that. And that was jumping through some hoops for some people to figure that crap out. But most of society did. Not but there's always going to be edge cases where it's just impossible and you need somebody managing stuff for you that you just don't have the cognitive abilities to do so. But I think Bitcoin through 2 mechanisms is getting to that place. And number one is not everybody needs to be using every insane thing that comes out that is like the most crazy secure, like, distributed and like,
yes,
11 of 15 multisig. you don't the average person with a basic hardware device, and their words backed up and stored somewhere else, maybe on a piece of steel if you're worried about a house fire, then the average person with that, they're fine. I think that it's still a learning curve, and I think that the interfaces will continue to get easier and easier and easier, and people will still be fine. But also, this is where I tend to push back the most when there's people saying like the average person will never be able to do this. I think that those statements that I hear from some people are total BS, because the average person will absolutely be able to do this if they want to. Now, whether or not they care to is a totally different thing, but would they be able to? 100%. And the reason being is, again, just it's unfamiliarity. People can learn things they're unfamiliar with. It just takes a little bit of time and effort. And then number 2 is that it's going to get easier. All of these things are going to get so much easier. It is so early. And like, Josh, you were talking about my jumping through hoops to like optimize on-chain fees and like do all these things. And I use a whole bunch of different apps. And you're absolutely right. I hopped through like a few different websites and like 3 different wallets and like did all these different things so that I'm utilizing it in the most efficient way. That will be one app eventually. Exactly. And it will be, you open up the app to set it up and it'll ask you a few questions about your preferences. It'll say, hey, what percentage of your Bitcoin do you want easily accessible for day-to-day expenditures? What percentage of your Bitcoin do you want just going into long-term savings? And in order to save on fees and getting stuff into on-chain long-term savings, is it okay if you make a slight trade-off in security in the midterm until it hits a certain threshold where it moves into long-term savings? It'll ask you a few simple questions about that. And based on your responses, you'll receive any type of Bitcoin transaction from any type of Bitcoin wallet, whether it be Lightning, Liquid, or on-chain, and it will allocate according to your preferences on whether you prioritize minimizing fees or full self-sovereignty on chain. And it'll just happen, and you'll have no idea in what form you're using Bitcoin, or you'll just know that I am relatively private. I've got a pretty good amount of self-sovereignty, and when it hits a certain threshold, it's going to be on-chain and absolutely secure with my own keys.
Yeah. I had a situation, Dan, you're familiar with this, and this is something we've talked about a few times personally, but I'll share it here. This was a real, and I'm sure you've had these, Ben, and I'm sure just about everyone who's been in Bitcoin long enough to have what they view as a substantial amount of Bitcoin, you've all had this butthole pucker moment when something doesn't quite work the way you thought or expected it might, and it scares the living shit out of you. So my example was, I'm using an unchained vault. I used the UTXOs, or not the UTXOs, the XPubs to create a viewing wallet on Sparrow. So now I've got these two things in tandem. I can see the transactions on Sparrow. I can see the transactions in Unchained. Sent what for me is a significant amount of Bitcoin to this vault, and I'm viewing it on Sparrow. And so now at this point, I'm like, well, I don't need to use Unchained. I'm just going to use Sparrow. So I'm sending more Bitcoin to Unchained using the addresses that Sparrow is creating, which are the same. But what I did, which messed things up a little bit out of sync, is I didn't just use the next address. I used, say, 5 addresses down. So as I'm sending money there, Sparrow's tracking it. Sparrow's got the correct number. I go into Unchained maybe a month or two later to look at it. It's not reflecting the same number. So I'm like, it's a moment of pure panic, right? You're like, uh-oh, something is not working the way I expected. But so the thing I would tell people to be very careful of is don't panic, because as we're outlining here, Bitcoin is tracking everything. All of these wallets they're viewing what they're being told to view. Mm-hmm. So what had happened there, the addresses that Unchained is looking at, it's not expecting those other addresses because I didn't use Unchained to create them. So it's just not viewing those. And Sparrow was viewing the ones that I told it to view. The first, I think 20 it does or whatever. And so the discrepancy was fine. Everything was okay. I didn't lose any money. But what I'm saying is, if you've messed around in this stuff long enough, you're going to have one of these moments when you get the shit scared out of you. Have you had something like that happen to you, Ben, where you realized you made maybe a technical difference between two wallets and then something's not showing up and it scares the shit out of you?
Yeah. And I mean, I deal with people that have those moments every single day, right? I do these one-on-one sessions with people and they're like, actually, you know what? Just funny enough, I know this is a bit on a tangent, but in the same realm, there's a guy that had been sagging Bitcoin like over the past few years. And he's like trying to recover some wallet and he has no idea where his shit is. And he's like, oh, there's a meaningful amount of Bitcoin in there. I hope that it's something. And so he had his seed phrase and he had like a cold card and everything. We're trying to load it up. And we open up his hot wallet. There's like not really anything. There's like $50 in there. We open up the cold card and there's like a singular transaction for like, 3/4 of a Bitcoin in and then out. And he's like, that's not even the full amount. Like, we just had no idea where it was. And then through his notes, I noticed that, he had taken a screenshot of like a deposit that he did and the address structure was different. So you can have addresses that start with BT1 and then ones start with 3. This one it started with a 3. I was like, oh, we're literally on your cold card. We're just looking at the wrong addresses. We're auditing the wrong addresses for a balance. And so we made that switch and all of his Bitcoin was there. And he was like, oh my God. Oh.
How much money do you want, Ben? You can have whatever you want. Thanks for saving my ass.
So like, but this is the type of thing that happens all the time. Like you say, like there's a good chance that you have it, but you're just looking in the wrong place. Yes. And these are little things that if you're unfamiliar, and then there's been other instances where like for instance, on Sparrow Wallet, and this is a common one where you can, you have the public addresses of a wallet and you can deposit to them. You can hit send and it should go off and everything. But Sparrow Wallet has a little toggle switch in the bottom right that connects you to the Bitcoin network. And sometimes people are sitting there and they're like, my balance isn't showing up. Like, it's just not. And they've withdrawn from an exchange or something. And the exchange is saying like, well, we sent it. This is a you problem. Like, we don't know what you did. Like, you gave us an address. Is this the address? Here it is on the blockchain. Like, and so like just the act of, I've had calls where somebody's like, all my Bitcoin is missing. I'm like, can you hit this one button? And they're like, oh my God,
there it is.
It's a miracle. You did it. And I'm like, we just connected you to the network. That's all.
Here's my,
that's a pretty common one I've seen too.
Here's my butthole pucker story. And now we're freaking some plebs out, but hey, we got to tell it like it is. I one time opened a wallet, which for me had a very significant amount of Bitcoin in my life. And I was querying the wrong script type in Sparrow. So, you got like legacy, nested SegWit, native SegWit, Taproot. And I knew like, oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. So I went through all four, like on a wallet. I was importing it in to like make sure everything looked good. And I thought I'd tried, let's say there's 4 types in Sparrow there. I like swore I went through all 4 and I was like, where the fuck is my Bitcoin? And so I sat there thinking, oh, I've already like checked the script types in there. Now I've got to like figure out what the problem is. Like an hour later, I'm like, all right, let me try the 4 types again. And bam, there it was. I got so I think I wasn't in full blown panic mode. And this is something you hit on a second ago, Josh. I was concerned, right? And the heart rate was elevating. But if you had, asked me, do you think your Bitcoin's gone? I would have emphatically said no. And part of the reason for that is I have a base understanding of how Bitcoin works and what kind of device that Bitcoin is stored on. And so that's back to my point earlier. Like if you want to get more comfortable and you want less, you want your sphincter to tighten less when these instances happen, understanding more like what keys are, what hardware wallets are, and using best practices can take the fear away when these situations arise, because you can go back and go, okay, take a deep breath. Like you're safe. Right. You're going to be okay.
One of the worst things in my view you could do in that situation is say, like you panic, right? And you go get your seed word, like your plate or whatever. And you start putting that into some like hot wallet to see if maybe you can reanimate it. And then your computer's compromised. And now you've opened yourself up to a potential serious problem of somebody stealing your money. Like that's the kind of solution that some people might come to that could fuck them over completely. Yeah. So again, it's like pump the brakes, think about what you're doing and how you did it, and maybe reach out to somebody who really knows what they're doing. If you're working with Unchained, they're a good place to go. Yeah. Any of these other, like Casa is another good example. They've got people that can help you. Ben, you can reach out to him. Dan and I maybe, but there's a lot of people out there that are very knowledgeable about how these things work.
Swan Support will walk you through a ton of shit. They're allocating more and more people to that. So there are people that will hold your hand when you're in these situations.
Yeah. I think again, in general, like don't panic, take it slow. Like, and also if you're trying to like see, in the instance where you're just pulling stuff up and there's just like a straight up zero balance, and like no transaction history, that's just the number one indicator that you're looking in the wrong place. Because in a hack situation, you would see a transaction of all of your money leaving. Yeah. Right. If you're seeing no indication that there's a history to the wallet, then it's very clear that you're just not looking at the right addresses, or you're just looking in the wrong place in some way. So there's a lot of things about Bitcoin that have checks and balances to make sure you're not screwing up too much. So like, if you're putting in a seed phrase, the final word is known as a checksum, which basically based on the previous words, whether it be a total of 12 or a total of 24, the 12th or the 24th word is mathematically defined to only be, I think, 7 different options based on the words that came before it. So if it's not one of those 7, then it gives you a warning. It's basically like the checksum is invalid. And so you'll know when you go to recover, if the checksum is valid and you're able to put in your 12 or 24 words, then the words are right, but if you're not seeing the right balance, then you're just maybe looking at the wrong addresses. If the checksum is invalid, then there's something wrong with the words. So there's different checks and balances. Same thing happens with Bitcoin addresses. It's very difficult to put in a Bitcoin address that's just like not a valid address. You can paste in incorrect addresses that go somewhere else, and there's
right.
But it's, you can't like delete a character off of an address accidentally and have your Bitcoin wallet be like, that's fine. You can do that on Ethereum.
that point you just made is really good, and I think it reduces a lot of fear. Right. Yeah. Great point, because I think a lot of people are the characters right. Obviously, it's a copy and paste, but people are checking back and forth.
Yeah,
it's not gonna send it to the planet Mars on accident here. It's either going to be a concentrated malicious attack that hopefully really isn't possible if you're using a hardware wallet. You're going to have to physically do something on that device. That's why you need to be using these devices, especially for large amounts that could be generational wealth type deal.
If it's a large amount, you should be checking that the hardware wallet is giving you the address. Don't trust your computer screen. Double check the address list on your cold card. That is my advice for that.
Exactly. That's
especially
like
a lot of
your
money.
Hardware is your beacon of truth. What's on your computer could be a total fabrication. And so like if your computer is compromised, and all these devices assume that the computer that they're dealing with is compromised, that's how they're designed. But the idea is what you see on your computer screen, you just cross-reference what's on the computer screen to the hardware. And so you just eyeball the beginning and the end of the address. And if it looks the same, it's very, very difficult on the fly to maliciously create an address that looks almost identical to the one that you're pasting in. That would be just not easily done. So as long as like that last chunk of digits are looking lined up in the first few, you can eyeball it pretty. You can get more comfortable with that over time, where you just kind of go, okay. Yeah, I'm good. And just be conscious again, if it's a large amount, and pay attention to the amounts that are being sent to. What does your hardware say? Not to what does your computer say? So yeah.
Just repetition. The more times you see Bitcoin move successfully, which it always does, unless you're totally fucking something up, it ends up where it's supposed to go. Once you see the plane land more and more, you're like, okay, I'm comfortable flying. And then the numbers that you're comfortable moving and the things you're comfortable doing expand.
We started this conversation down the road of like that fee video, and it can be, fees can go up, which makes experimentation expensive.
Yeah,
but there are ways to learn on Bitcoin that don't require you, to be spending a whole bunch of money. Number one, you can use testnet. Testnet is, you can use testnet coins, which have no value, but allow you to practice. So that's one thing that you can do. And you can find like online faucets that allow you to get testnet coins and stuff like that. So that's one option. But number two is, I think Liquid is also a great option just for experimentation, because transaction fees are like a few pennies. And so like if you got a Lightning wallet, you can swap into Liquid very easily. And then you can just test sending transactions and backing up and recovering wallets and things like that, so that you get the lay of the land. Right. And you can practice with that with like $10. And then you that gets you comfortable to then move into on-chain hardware, all of that stuff. And like you'll be very familiar with it in that instance.
The perfect segue here, Sessions, into what we think is maybe the biggest priority in this chat, and talking about stacking in a higher fee environment, talking about UTXOs, because things are changing. And I think the onus is on people like us to start changing our tune a little bit. Like I've been giving some thought to, have we not been vocal enough about, say, UTXO management? Now we had Tom Hanzik on here, I don't know, a year and a half ago, talking about it from Unchained, specific episode dedicated to it. But there are people out there that have been doing daily buys and, daily or weekly dumps into cold storage. And those type of folks are, I don't want to say fully, but partially up shit creek. And I think it's important that we start shedding more light on this. I'm going to let you go wherever, however you want. Let's start with what a UTXO is, Why are fees higher? And then we can get into some of the tech takeaways.
Okay. So overall, let's discuss, first of all, like what's happening in your wallet when you receive Bitcoin. It is not an account system. It's not just, oh, you have a wallet, and then when you receive a transaction, you just have a singular balance that says a number. It is more like receiving cash. If somebody hands you bills, if somebody hands you a 20 and a 10 and a 5, when you go to look in your wallet later, you don't just see $35, you see a 20, a 10, and a 5. And so when you're receiving Bitcoin transactions, each transaction that you receive is an identifiable chunk of Bitcoin known as UTXO for the exact amount that you receive. And so all of these little pieces are sitting in your wallet. The difference between cash and Bitcoin is Bitcoin more, when you go to spend, it's more like, let's say I had that 20, 10, and a 5, and I wanted to spend, I don't know, I wanted to spend like, we'll say 20 or like $32 or something. So I had 35. What I'm actually doing is kind of like I had a coin worth each of those amounts. And what I'm going to do when I spend it is I melt it down and I forge 2 new coins. So I have a $32 coin that I'm spending, and I've got $3 in change, which is going to be a single coin that comes back to me. So each time that you spend, you're basically smelting down to the denominations that you need. Now, the tricky thing about Bitcoin is your on-chain fees are the function of 2 things. Number one, they're the function of how many people are trying to transact at the same time. How busy is the network? Because there's a limited amount of data that can be put through. And then how much data is your transaction itself taking up? It has nothing to do with the amount of money you're sending. In many instances, if you're sending $20 or $10 billion, in many instances, it's possible that those transactions could cost exactly the same to send.
Which is cool as hell, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, it's just also scary as hell, because if you've accumulated, say, 100 UTXOs that are all very small, the transaction fee could potentially be worth more than the Bitcoin that you have, which is why this is so important, because that would be called, people refer to that as dust. If you have a very small UTXO, it's actually more expensive to send it than it is worth. So it's basically, you don't have anything because the transaction fees are too high for you to get any value output.
Yeah. So when you're sending a transaction, it takes more data to send multiple small pieces of Bitcoin and smelt them all together and get them out the other side than it does to take a singular piece of Bitcoin and then send that straight through and get your change. So if you've been sitting there and you've been stacking $20 at a time directly on chain into a wallet, and you go to spend $1,000 or move $1,000, that's going to cost you, I don't know, like it depends how busy the network is. It might cost you a couple $100. It might be like 20% of the stack. It might be more. It really depends on the situation at the time and how busy the network is and how fast you want to get it through. And so the way you can solve for that directly on chain, like if you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, I've been doing $20 cost averages into a hardware wallet. What the hell do I do now? Well, what I would do as you is I would take a look and I would see what fees are at currently. And a good website for this is mempool.space, mempool.space. And that gives you a picture of, kind of what current fees are. What does it cost to get into the next block on average, blah, blah, blah. And if they have been dipping, if it's not exorbitantly expensive to do a transaction, then what you can do is you can do UTXO consolidation. And I talked about like melting down coins into a larger coin. You're sending money to yourself, to one of your own addresses, and you're just sending all of it. And it melts it down into the equivalent of like a big gold bar, which then makes it, because there's less data, to send that out later. Even if fees are high, you've only got one UTXO to deal with, or maybe a couple, instead of just a ton of them. That's going to screw you in fees. And so you can, even in Sparrow Wallet, when there's the send to field, there's a little arrow that drops down, and you can just hit the arrow, and there's an option that will say the name of your wallet, and in brackets it'll say consolidation. And you can just click that. It'll pick one of your own addresses, and then you can say, hit the max button, and you're sending all of your Bitcoin to yourself, and then that will consolidate down everything into a single quote unquote gold bar. There is a trade-off with privacy there.
Yes.
So you need to note that if you've been like coin joining and things like that, and you've got like these chunks of Bitcoin that are kind of separate and private, putting them all back together can undo some of that privacy that you've gained. So, you may want to just you may be thinking a way where you're like, I want to have large bills, but I don't want, if you go to pay at a merchant, for instance, if I had like $1 million worth of Bitcoin, it's effectively $1 million bill, and it's like going into a corner store or a t-shirt shop and buying a $20 t-shirt, and the clerk sees the $999,000 worth of change that they gave back to me. They're going to be like, especially if you're doing this online and they're shipping to your house, they may be like, that's worth a plane ticket for me and the cost of a $5 wrench.
Yeah.
Folks, when a fellow firefighter, family member, or friend asks us where we buy Bitcoin, we point them to Swan. It's the place Josh and I have dollar cost averaged into Bitcoin for years. At Swan Bitcoin, you can set up automated Bitcoin savings plans as well as execute instant purchases. They serve clients of any size, from firefighters to institutional investors, and an account is startlingly easy to set up. I've watched a fireman do it on a smartphone while sitting in a recliner in less than 7 minutes. Swan also offers Bitcoin IRAs. You can start or roll over a traditional or Roth IRA with enterprise-grade custody, attentive service, easy onboarding, and transparent fees. Visit swan.com for details on everything that Swan offers.
Totally. My follow-up question is going to be for you practically, and this is going to be different for each person. How many UTXOs is a good idea? I was actually looking into this the other week when the fee environment gets higher. This gets back on my radar. I'll share some numbers of what I found the other day. I forget how many sats per byte it was. It was elevated, but it wasn't like at the recent peak. One of my main places I have wallets, there were 7 UTXOs. For me to consolidate all of it would have cost me $24. Another wallet I have, probably more UTXOs that I'm going to prefer carrying forward, 17. And that was going to cost me $68. So talking about dust, if in that wallet with 17 UTXOs or 17 bills or denominations of Bitcoin, that amount, this is maybe the most simple I can distill it, that amount was less than $68. I'm in dust territory. And this is applicable to just like what percentage are you comfortable with? You've got $1,000 of Bitcoin and 100 UTXOs, and in a high fee environment, it's going to cost you $200 to move it. That's not impossible math based on places we've been. That's 20% of the value. So if this is freaking you out a little bit, it is worth paying attention to this. I don't think the immediate answer is consolidate to one UTXO for privacy reasons Ben just mentioned. But it's something worth paying attention to. And then before I throw that question to you, I think another note, it's just so easy to show cold cards because we like them so much. But this is why we've said before, cold cards are easy to use, but they're not too easy to use. If you have no idea what a UTXO is, you haven't been using a cold card, because cold card forces you to use a desktop wallet or something that gives you a little bit more awareness of what's happening under the hood than just saying popping into Ledger. Sidebar there, go back to how do you prefer thinking this through? For let's just keep it a large amount of Bitcoin that you plan to pass on in the future or use in 20 years. What kind of UTXO breakdown are you thinking?
So I think of it in terms of like the size of bills that I want to carry. And so I've heard people toss around like the idea of having, UTXOs that are of the size of like 1 million sats,
A million or more. Yeah.
That's pretty solid. Right now, 1 million sats is what, $380. Okay, so that's manageable. And like in a worst case scenario where fees are exorbitant and it costs like, we've recently seen them where a regular transaction might cost 10 or $20. Not the end of the world to move 1 million sat UTXO. And also you got to think that right now I said 1 million sats is around $380, but that could 10x, right? And so, that then, proportionally the fee that you're paying, you're moving a fair amount of money, and that the fee may not be as bad there. It may be worse, but like you just need to keep in context, like, what am I doing? And I think in general, people are going to approach it in a way where they say, okay, I've got my larger long-term savings sitting in these like larger bars of gold. And then if I want it spendable, then you'll be able to just send it to a wallet that'll convert it to like a lightning spendable amount. And so I think we're reaching the age where people are becoming conscious of how efficient they are on chain. And we ran into this before, but not as much for the individual, more so for the exchanges, right? That happened at the peak in 2017. We hit a point where I remember on chain, because there were no dials and buttons to really set your fees efficiently in some wallets. And I remember, and like there's nobody knew anything about UTXO management. And so I remember at the peak of 2017 sending a transaction. It cost me $100.
I sent something for like 85 back then. It was insane how expensive it was.
Yeah, it just, there was no management, and none of the exchanges were batching. So every withdrawal was an individual on-chain transaction. So that forced the businesses of exchanges to go, we need to be efficient. We're now getting to a place where individuals also need to be efficient. So I think what you'll see is you'll see suites of tools. Like you said, that video that I just did, I'm jumping through hoops to be efficient, but it's possible. So that means it's possible to bake that in and automate it into single tools. So I think you're going to see that. It's not here yet. So if you want to know how to do it, just go watch that video. And then all of a sudden you can have, in my opinion, reasonable trade-offs where you can still do your, like, as long as you're on an efficient exchange that's batching transactions and not swiping or not costing you in fees to withdrawal. If you can do that, then you can be auto sending to yourself in a way that you don't have an on-chain footprint. And then you can hit a threshold and then go on chain and save long term.
Yeah. We talk quite often on this podcast about multisig. And I think everyone pretty much, well, if you don't understand what that is, we don't have enough time here to really go into it, but your videos on it are great. One of the things I think a lot of people have an issue with is deciding where to separate these seeds and these cold cards or signing devices, where to put them. Do you have some pretty decent advice? I mean, everyone knows that like you should geographically distribute these things, right? Yeah. You should have like a friend or a family member. What are some of the more interesting ways you've heard of people hiding these devices or places they're putting them where they feel there's enough security, but they're not opening themselves up to too much liability by keeping them like security deposit boxes? Yeah. That could be a good idea. The problem is at some point, if there's overreach by government entities, they could open up safety deposit boxes potentially. What are basically some good ideas on where you could hide some of these devices?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll give just a tiny bit of context here in and around implications of the individual devices in a multisig. So multisig, basically, a regular single sig is you've got a digital vault and you have a single key that can open that vault, and you can have spare keys as well. You can, your seed phrase is a spare key. A multisig is a digital vault that has multiple keyholes and you need a certain threshold of keys to unlock it. So it's kind of like a multi-sig vault might have 3 keyholes, and you need at least 2 of those keys simultaneously to unlock it. And so in those instances, the why you would do a multi-sig vault is you're hedging against physical attack. Hardware devices hedge against digital attack primarily, I would say, because the keys are offline. The keys are sitting in a device not connected to the internet. A multi-sig vault hedges against somebody getting physical access to the one key that opens the vault. If there's multiple keys, they're going to have to go for a drive or jump on an airplane to get the other key that unlocks the vault. And there's a whole host of things that can prevent that from happening. So that's great. When storing those, there's kind of 2 things to contend with multisig. You got the keys, but in a way, you've also got what's known as a wallet file. It's like the map to your vault. You could have enough keys to unlock the vault, but if you don't know where the vault is, they're useless. And so you can think about this in different ways. Number one, if somebody gets 1 key, they have nothing. They cannot open the vault in any way. There's also, depending on how you store things, there's also no indication necessarily that device is part of a multisig. It's just a key. And so it's like, if they manage to get the PIN, or if they get the seed phrase, they might plunk that into a wallet to check what's there, and there might be nothing. And they'll just go, oh, no wallet history. Oh, well. Or you might put a decoy amount in there and there's like a few $100 and they're like, oh, I guess this guy didn't have very much savings. What a LARP. So there might be a degree of that. Now, the tricky bit too is you want to store that map, that wallet file. You want a copy of that as well. You might store that with the individual keys.
Yeah.
Because again, if somebody has the map and they have 1 key, they still have, like, they can see the balance. They could pitch you a few sats and help top off your balance. But they can't unlock the vault. They don't have enough keys, and they're not going to get on a plane to go get the other one, probably. So, and the other thing about this too is typically for me, like if I've got a single sig, then I want to store. I like to have it in different locations. I like to have the device somewhere. If it's used for day to day, then I like to have the device accessible, and then the seed stored somewhere else. But you could, technically speaking, store these 2 things in the same location because the seed itself is not enough to access the funds. And if the seed is in steel, then a house fire, actually, you don't lose the key. The steel is still salvageable. So there's been, I think that you mention Unchained. Okay, so in that instance, Unchained has a key. You have 2 keys. But each key in the form of a hardware device is also going to have a backup. So it's kind of up to you whether you say, I'm going to keep the device and their backups together, or whether you separate those out so that you actually have 4 things in 4 different locations. That's totally up to you. The one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to store enough key material in the same location where you have the threshold of keys to access.
Yeah.
So you're not going to mix and match the devices and the seed plates, vice versa, because if you've got a seed plate for 1 key and you've got a device for the other key, you've got both keys accessible in one spot. So you could be coerced into accessing the funds. And the whole point is, if somebody comes into your house, the $5 wrench, and they say, give me all your Bitcoin, you cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just make sure that the keys are separated, and then it's up to you whether you take every part of that and disperse it. Safety deposit boxes, if you're worried about the state, then you don't store the map there. You store the key, you maybe put a decoy amount in there, but you have no indication that thing is part of a multisig.
Yeah. Good
advice.
tips. I would also say, I think you need to store them. You hinted at this, but to articulate it again, store the map in more than 1 location.
Yes.
I would have multiple copies of that. The longer we've been at this, Ben, we both, I think, are in alignment that we are pushing people towards getting to a spot where they're doing multisig. You're not going to be there right away. You need to start understanding how to move Bitcoin to a single sig wallet, but stuff is getting easy enough and accessible enough with things like Unchained and Nunchucks set up now. And there's other options. It's like if you're confused listening, it is best for you to get to a point where if someone finds one thing in one location, as you just said, they do not have access to your stack. And we would encourage you, do not have eventually, especially if you're accumulating a really meaningful amount of Bitcoin, do not have a situation where if someone is in your house, they can access all of your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like you may not be there right away, but grow to a point where someone could fucking break into your house. And as you said, you are unable to give them your Bitcoin because of how you've got it properly distributed.
Yeah.
One other question for you, Ben, about storing the map itself.
Yes.
I don't know if you can do this in Sparrow. Maybe you can enlighten me. But in Spectre, I know you can create a QR code or you can actually print out. I know using a printer for this may not necessarily be the best idea. But if you want, do you think you would recommend just a digital copy on, like, say, a good SD card, maybe multiples of that?
Yeah.
Or would you prefer to hold that map on actual physical media?
I think redundancy wise, and there's some interesting ways to do this. I'll bring up one that is kind of on the forefront of this, but let's say you have like an Unchained Vault or a Nunchuck, like Honey Badger assisted multisig or whatever it is. So in both those instances, you can download a file and you can import that file wherever. And so like in that instance, it's an assisted multisig, which I think for the average person, if you're doing multisig, assisted multisig is kind of the way to go, because then you have a company there that, one, cannot access your Bitcoin unilaterally, but two, are there if you screw up. And so like the Unchained example you gave, you've got two devices and a backup to each device. You've got 4 things. You could lose 3 of those things and go to Unchained and still be fine.
Yes.
So that's kind of the whole point. But the wallet file itself, even when you're using assisted multisig, you want that file and you want it somewhere else. And the reason being is, if you're using Unchained and you don't have that file, there's a couple things that could happen. Number one is that, you know, the company goes bust and disappears and you miss every single email of them notifying you like, hey, pretty soon we're going to go out of business and you need to migrate your funds away and everything. As soon as that website shuts down, if they've got the map and you do not, it doesn't matter that you have the 2 keys. You don't know where the vault is anymore. You don't have the map. You lost the map. You're screwed. So you got to get that map and you just got to have it somewhere. You can save it. You can put it like in Sparrow on your computer so you can then audit your balance at the same time. But the point is, when you do that, you can now unilaterally move funds without ever having to log into Unchained again if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And same thing with Nunchuck. You can export, they call it the BSMS file, but you can import that to Sparrow. So you can, like, number one, get it on an interface where you can interact with it on your own. But number two, you might want a backup of it. You might want to like put it on an SD card or something like that and then store it at a different location. You're super redundant at that point. If you've got Unchained or Nunchuck that have the wallet file, if you've got a copy of the wallet file just natively on your laptop, I'd say that's already redundant enough. But if you want like even extra, then sure, slap it on an SD card and put it at your family's house in their safe or something like that.
In your Faraday cage in case there's an EMP.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Now the other cool thing I think that's coming that exists today. There's something called oh God, now I'm gonna forget what it's called. Oh my God, is it? Oh God, it's
the guy who developed it's listening. He's like, come on, Ben, fuck, say it.
I know.
God damn it.
Is it Stampseed? No, it's not Stampseed. So basically what he's done, this guy, and I'm gonna lose my mind. You guys are gonna have to look it up and put it in the show notes afterwards. But it's this crazy device, and it basically it will engrave like QR codes and your seed phrase and everything onto a metal plate, and it just like and then it'll boom, 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 boom. And it's this huge, like industrial looking device, but it takes a multisig and it does it in a way where on the front, you have the seed phrase of the device and the private key of the device, of the one device, or not even the device, of the one key. And you have 3 of those. But on the other side, you've got the map, but not the entire map. It takes 2 of those QR codes, any combination of the 3 things, to recreate the map. So then at this point, you don't have to store a device and a copy of the map, a device and a copy of the map, a device and the copy of the map, because in all of those instances, somebody could pull up your map and see the total amount.
Wow,
and
this is fucking cool.
Yeah, we got to get one of these.
It's like any 2 of these steel plates. If somebody just has one, they have a single key and they have no idea what's in the multisig. They can't even see the balance.
I love this idea.
And so any 2 of these plates in combo, you can recreate the map and have access to the full funds.
Wait, what is this called?
Yeah, we got to find out what this is called. We will get it in the show notes, and I will be ordering one.
Yeah. Vulcan, I think they're partnered with Vulcan, and they do like seed plates and stuff like that. Oh God, I'm so upset with myself for not Vulcan 21. And let me see if the geez. Anyways, if you go through Vulcan 21, and I believe that they're partnered with the company, I'm racking my brain. There's so many like seed.
You got so many things up there. Oh yeah.
Steel, like so. Nonetheless, I think what they're doing is really cool, and just the idea of basing it around the multisig, and it works beautifully with something like the Seed Signer, which is like a DIY build it yourself signing device.
Wait, so how do you get this information into this device in order for it to create that QR code?
You'd create it with the Seed Signer. The Seed Signer would export the information.
Oh, I see.
To this industrial stamp, and then you would put in these plates, and it would put in all of the information you need on the 3 plates, and then you would simply just put the plates where you need, and then you could literally hop from location to location with your Seed Signer and just like scan the necessary information and then sign transactions. Yeah.
The amount of innovation, man. It's so cool. There's so many. I mean, this is just the beauty of open source innovation. There's just this giant hive mind trying to improve this. And for as techie as this episode may have seemed to some people, I like that you've a couple times reiterated, you're going to have tremendous optionality if you want to go as techie as possible. But the flip side to this movement forward of innovation is that it's going to make robust solutions so much more accessible and easy than it is today.
Yeah. I found it, by the way. So I'm gonna start again with an apology, a Canadian apology. Sorry, I couldn't remember the name of this, but Seed Hammer. I met this guy.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah, I met this guy in Prague, and he had the whole thing there, and it was boom, 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 like doing these plates and everything. And he gave me like a full demo and showed me how it would work and everything. So cool. And like you go to seedhammer.com and they've got like the video of exactly how it's working and everything. It's super cool. What a good idea. I remember he said that Jameson Lopp was over there talking to him. He's like, how in the hell did you get the wallet file? Because it's like a really dense amount of information. He's like, how did you get it to fit on the back of that plate? It doesn't look like a dense enough QR code to do this. And he is explaining like the wallet file itself is also a 2 of 3 multisig to reestablish, right? Like a 2 of 3 pieces can create the wallet file.
Cool. Wow. Yeah, that is cool.
Man, we could keep
I'm gonna
going.
pee my pants, man.
I'm barely. I got so much more I want to ask you, but we'll
I drank
put a pin in it here.
Carafe while we were talking, and I'm gonna pee my pants here in a minute.
Yeah, fair.
Sessions, hand off to you. Anything else you want to say to close, and then hand off to you in your work. And I'm telling you, we're already looking forward to the next one because I feel like we just hit the tip of the iceberg today.
Yeah, man. 2 things. First of all, thanks for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun. Made my day. Very excited about this one dropping. Number 2, when do you know when this will drop? Like what day it's going to go out?
It should be Sunday.
Okay.
Saturday or Sunday.
Okay, cool. So when it goes out, it will be about a week before I host the first ever Saturday Sat Market in Calgary. I have a culmination of merchants from not just Calgary, but like around the province and coming in from other provinces. We have 30 plus merchants right now, all accepting Bitcoin, a bunch of farmers with beef, eggs, whole bunch of stuff like that. We've got artists, we've got apparel, we've got hardware company, we've got, but like just stuff that you can get. And so I'm basically trying to grassroots build a Bitcoin circular economy here. And then we're going to make a blueprint and we're going to help people do it in other cities too. So anybody that sees that Saturday Sat Market, there's an event on the Orange Pill app. There's an event also on meetup.com. We're going to start pumping it out on social media. But even if you're not local, if you can't make it, amplify it, because I want to build this thing up. I want to make it a success and I want to show other people how to do it. So that's number one. And number two is I'm super stoked to have you guys on the Christmas show.
Let's go.
Dude, we are stoked to be there.
Dude,
let's go.
It's massive. The people that are coming for it are incredible. Can I give you guys a quick breakdown?
Please do. Please do.
Up? Okay, so this is December 22nd.
Hold on, while you do this, I'm going to pee into this carafe.
Yes, do it. Yep.
This is, by the way, this is actually happening. This is like Foss, but a little more refined. Instead of just going in the chair, he's going to go straight in the carafe.
Perfect. Okay, so it's going to start at 5 p.m. Eastern time on Friday, December 22nd. This is a marathon. It goes well into the night. It's going to be 5 or 6 hours long. It's crazy. The panels are 30-minute panels with tailored guests. I've got a panel on circular economies with Joe Hall, Mike Peterson from Bitcoin Beach, and Brian DeMint from Orange Pill app. I've got a panel on Fiat is Broken with Larry Lepard, Peter St. Onge, and James Lavish. I've got a panel on Bitcoin tools, including privacy, self-custody, no KYC. Francis Pouliot. Vortex is returning from retirement. So if back in the day you watch Vortex, he's back. So stoked about that. And Wicked is joining as well. We've got a NOSTR panel with Walker and Carla, Will from Damus, and Rockstar Dev. We've got Lightning Growth and Tools with Guy Swan, Ben the Carmen from Mutiny Wallet, and Nate Before Bacon from Voltage. We've got, of course, you gents for making it as a blue collar pleb along with Dom. So that's going to be an absolute blast. We've got Clown World at its finest with Madex, Harry Sudduck, and American Hodl.
Oh, that follows us? That's going to be some... I'm going to be sticking around for that.
And then we've got Lessons from 2023 with Nico from Simply Bitcoin, Nat Brunel, and Tour de Meester. And then we wrap it up with the after party. Anders, Pubby, Rick from Crypto Cloaks, Yellow, Sean Harris, Greg Zaj, Rusty, Becca. It's just going to be a big party. And I'm going to drink a whole bunch of whiskey at the end.
Banger.
Nice.
Yeah, it's going to be... Dom's already saying... We're bringing drinks to the party. It's going to be that fine balance, though. I'll close with this. The last time we saw you in person down in LA, we were sipping, I thought, really strong old fashions. You were I remember standing there.
Good.
Sessions was talking, and it was that moment in the night where I go, I'm going to have to keep my wits about me, because even two or three of these could really spoil the blue collar Bitcoin reputation real fast at this party.
I spoiled my own reputation plenty that night.
I don't think we could do that, Dan. Let's be real.
You're right. We're immune. Yeah, we can't be canceled.
We got the easy get out of jail free card. We're just a couple of firefighters that get drunk and act like idiots.
Yep. Sessions, we appreciate you, brother. Thanks so much for a lot of time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Blast. I would be super stoked to come back anytime.
You will be. I seriously am not even close to getting through my list, so we're going to have you again. Don't worry.
Awesome. It'll be a 5-hour Sessions episode.
I think so.